Earlier today, two big updates came out about possible quarterbacks for the Las Vegas Raiders. Now that the Super Bowl is over and the 2024 season has officially ended, teams are preparing for free agency, which starts on March 10th. The Raiders are in an interesting position because they have a lot of flexibility with their salary cap. Right now, they have 27 players set to become free agents and around $100 million to work with. One of the biggest updates came from the New York Jets, who announced that they are moving on from Aaron Rodgers. This immediately started a discussion online. Should the Raiders try to bring him in? It's a big decision because the Raiders have different options for their quarterback position. They could go all in for the next 3 to 4 years while head coach Pete Carroll is still around, making a strong push to win a Super Bowl. Or they could take a more long-term approach, draft a young quarterback in the second round, and develop him over time. As for Rodgers, opinions are mixed. Some people don't like him, and others question whether he's still a top player. But if we look at the numbers, last season he threw 28 touchdowns and 11 interceptions with almost 4,000 passing yards, and that's after coming back from a serious Achilles injury that kept him out the previous year. As the season went on, he kept improving, showing he can still perform at a high level. So the big question is, should the Raiders go for Rodgers or take a different path? They have some big choices ahead. Aaron Rodgers is still a solid quarterback. The biggest problem for the New York Jets last season wasn't just his play, it was the fact that they moved on from head coach Robert Saleh and didn't have a strong offensive coaching staff. Without a good system in place, success was hard to come by. Now, looking at the Raiders, they are actually in a pretty good position heading into next season. There's a possibility they could bring in Rodgers at a lower cost since he is still under contract with the Jets. It would be similar to what happened with Russell Wilson and the Steelers last season when they got him for just a few $1,000,000. If the Raiders could work out a similar deal, it might make sense financially. Right now, the Raiders are built as a defensive team, but that could change quickly. They have a lot of key players hitting free agency, including Nate Hobbs, Trevion Muhrig, Isaiah Pola-Mao, and Marcus Epps in the secondary. At linebacker, Robert Spillane and Divine Diablo are also pending free agents, along with other important defensive pieces like Malcolm Kunze and Adam Butler. This means the Raiders could choose to rebuild their defense or shift their focus toward offense. Instead of re-signing all these defensive players, they could use that money to bring in top offensive talent, like a star receiver, and pair that with a quarterback like Rodgers. At the end of the day, the Raiders have many different paths they can take. But one thing is clear, Rodgers is still a capable quarterback. His 28-touchdown, 11-interception performance last season is something few Raiders quarterbacks have matched in the last 20 years. With the right strategy, the team has a lot of flexibility to shape its future. In 3 years, the Raiders' coaching staff could look very different. Patrick Graham might become a head coach, and Chip Kelly could be leading another team. Right now, this might be the best coaching group the Raiders have had in a long time, which is why they need to seriously consider going all in on a quarterback. If Aaron Rodgers only costs a couple of $1,000,000 to bring in, it could be a smart move. The team could then use its draft picks to strengthen other key positions, maybe a running back, an offensive guard, or a defensive player like a safety or an edge rusher. They also have the option to re-sign some of their pending free agents. The exciting part is that the Raiders finally have decision-makers who understand how to build a winning team. In the past, they made questionable draft picks, like choosing Tyree Wilson over Jalen Carter or Alex Leatherwood over Christian Darrisaw. But now, they have a front office that knows what they're doing, which makes this offseason so important. Another name to watch is Matthew Stafford. According to a recent report, the Los Angeles Rams are open to trading him. Some might doubt the credibility of the source, but he has strong connections with executives from both the Rams and the Chargers. If the Rams decide to move on from Stafford, he could be another option for the Raiders. Much like Rodgers, Stafford is a veteran quarterback who could play for the next 2 or 3 years. The Raiders could take advantage of their current coaching staff, bring in an experienced quarterback, and make a serious push to win now. It's going to be an interesting offseason, and the Raiders have big decisions ahead. If the Raiders are interested in Matthew Stafford, they'll need to figure out how to build the team around him, who to keep, who to let go, and how to structure the offense. Stafford is a different situation compared to Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers is already set to leave the Jets, even though it hasn't been officially announced. The team's recent social media post makes it clear that they're moving on. The actual announcement will likely come in the next few weeks, and if they wait until after June 1st, they can spread out the $49 million dead cap hit over 2 seasons instead of just one. Stafford, on the other hand, is looking for a new contract, likely around $40 million per year, or even more. He might want a deal similar to the one Kirk Cousins got from the Falcons, which was worth $160 million. Unlike Rodgers, Stafford won't come cheap, and the Rams also want draft picks in return. There's also a report that the New York Giants aren't happy with this year's quarterback draft class. They might consider trading for Stafford, and the Rams could be interested in getting the Giants' 3rd overall pick. The Rams reportedly aren't looking for a quarterback this year, but they might want to trade down and collect future assets to move up in next year's draft. So, while Stafford is currently linked to the Giants, he could also be an option for the Raiders. He's still a capable quarterback with a few good years left. If the Raiders want to go all in on a short-term plan to win a Super Bowl, Stafford could be a solid choice. Why not take a chance? We've seen quarterbacks like Tom Brady win a Super Bowl with the Buccaneers, and Peyton Manning do the same with the Broncos. The Raiders could follow a similar path by bringing in an experienced quarterback to lead the team. While Stafford and Rodgers aren't at their peak, they are still highly skilled players who could make a big impact if the team is built correctly and has the right coaching staff in place. Now, some people might wonder if the Raiders are even considering this strategy. Do they actually want to go after a veteran quarterback? According to Jeremy Fowler from ESPN, the answer is yes. He reported that multiple NFL executives believe the Raiders are targeting veteran QBs. Fowler also mentioned that Sam Darnold could be an option because the Raiders have a mid-first-round pick, sitting outside the top 5 in the draft. Since they don't have a top pick, it might make more sense for them to go after an experienced quarterback rather than a rookie. This aligns with the idea of bringing in players like Stafford or Rodgers. Additionally, Colin Cowherd reported that the Giants, who hold the 3rd overall pick, aren't impressed with this year's quarterback class. If that's true, it raises questions. If a team that desperately needs a quarterback isn't eager to draft one, what does that say about the available prospects? For the Raiders, this could mean they have options. They could still land a promising player at number 6 overall, but they might prefer a top defensive player instead of reaching for a quarterback they don't fully believe in. Some reports suggest they may only be interested in Cam Ward from this draft class, and if that's the case, they could decide to prioritize defense instead. Over the next few weeks, we'll get a clearer picture of what the Raiders plan to do, but for now, it looks like they are seriously considering the veteran quarterback market. I'm completely on board with this approach. Sure, bringing in a veteran quarterback isn't a perfect long-term solution, but it's a smart move if you don't have a top-tier young QB available. Of course, in a perfect world, the Raiders would draft a young superstar like Patrick Mahomes or a prime Matthew Stafford. But that's not the only way to build a winning team. In fact, reaching for a quarterback with the 6th overall pick, when the class isn't strong, could actually hurt the team in the long run. If that player doesn't pan out, the team ends up worse off, while other teams that drafted top talent at different positions thrive. Look at players like Christian Darrisaw and Jalen Carter. Teams that took them instead of reaching for a QB are now much better off. For the Raiders, if this year's quarterback class isn't strong, there's no need to force a pick. Instead, they can bring in a veteran and maybe take a developmental quarterback in the later rounds. That way, they get the best of both worlds, a reliable starter and a young player to groom for the future. This offseason might start slow, but things are going to heat up fast. Once moves start happening, it'll be non-stop action, and I'm more excited for the Raiders than I have been in years. One thing I've learned over the past decade is that coaching matters, maybe even more than the quarterback.